Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H virtual event space. I haven't been here in a while. Feels weird. But Oren Soffer is going to help me get back into the groove, of course. Director of photography, Oren Soffer, who you are all going to be watching live June 17th at BILD, 11 a.m. on the fourth floor, the filmmaking stage. So just throwing that out there. We'll probably plug it a couple more times in this. But Oren, welcome, man. It's good to have you on.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad to be here in the virtual space.
The virtual space. I got to throw it out to everybody. Oren is on the road. He's on the tour bus right now. He's a busy,
Oh,
busy, busy
us.
guy. So if the connection's a little wonky, give him some grace. This is the virtual world. This is how we do things now. I feel like we've come full circle. It was like early, there was no bandwidth, and you had to wait. And we've come full circle now to where it's like, yeah, there's a lot of bandwidth, but we're doing a million things at once, and everybody's on the internet at the same time. So we had to get back to the hurry up and wait kind of thing.
Yeah, can I rant for 2 seconds?
Go for it.
It's 2025. We have like AI technology and all this stuff, right? How have we not solved like endless connectivity anywhere you are at all times? Like, can we just fix that first
Yes.
and then
Everything
do AI?
else.
Like, can I just have a phone call with somebody that doesn't just like drop out and, have garbled audio? Like, can we fix that first and then like take everybody's jobs with AI? Like, just do this and then do technology with other stuff. Like, please prioritize the things that actually help. Okay? Let's just,
I'm,
anyway,
I'm
that's my
sorry to everyone who came here for filmmaking. We're changing the topic now. We're going to be talking about bandwidth for the next, 30 minutes to
bandwidth.
an hour. We're going to be talking, bandwidth. Why don't we have it? But it's true. Look,
Why can't
no
we
matter
talk
where
to
we
each other?
go, look at all the things I always come back to like some of the things that you see that we can do now. And it's like we can literally, we know what an atom looks like, but we
Yeah.
can't get bandwidth in like the middle of Indiana or
You
Ohio
put
or
you put human beings on the moon in the 1960s, and you drive through Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles in the middle of the city, and you lose cell service. Explain that to me. Anyway, hello
yeah.
everybody. What a start.
Let me come on my yeah, there we go. Now we're off to a good start. I look, I was like, I had this whole like, we'll start your origin story, how you got into it. Now I'm like, no, I just want to dive into 2025. Like, what's going on in 2025? What are we doing now? What is I was gonna say the origin story, the origin story.
The
For
orange,
I gotta
the
make it
orange.
one bad dad joke everything. What's the
Oh
origin
man,
story? How did you get into the whole filmmaking thing? Were you was it like, hey, I was 6 years old and they put a 8 millimeter camera in my hand or
pretty much. It wasn't 8 millimeter, but no, I mean I started pretty young. Like I started watching movies very young. Like I have a distinct memory of watching The Empire Strikes Back. Well, I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but I remember seeing Yoda in like preschool. I guess they put it on and I remember Yoda. Like that was seared into my brain. I mean, I must have been 3 years old. And and then I think very quickly after that I became like a Star Wars kid and watched all those movies and got into Indiana Jones and Back to the Future and Jurassic Park. I remember seeing that in theaters. I'm gonna age
Mm.
myself, but I remember seeing that
What's the
like that was the
theater?
first movie I remember seeing in the movie theater when it came out. So, people can go do math. But and I was a big dinosaur kid and all that. So, yeah, it was like all of the, it's just the Amblin, Spielberg, E.T., that kind of thing. And yeah, I just loved movies as a kid with no concept of how they got made. It was all just, that movies were just a thing that I loved. And at the same time, I was also just a very creative kid. Like I was drawing, I was a very big drawer. Like I was drawing all the
Mm.
time and just very imaginative. Like me and my friends would run around the backyard, like coming up with all sorts of stories and things. Just like a very imagination forward kind of thing. And somehow those two things were always separate, but probably around like late, like early middle school, like around 10 or 11. I think the two like I had an epiphany basically. And it was all thanks to the uh well, the early seed was the Star Wars special editions. They came with a CD-ROM that had
They're all bad.
like an interactive CD-ROM that had behind the scenes of the making of the original Star Wars trilogy. And I think that was the first time I saw anything that was like behind the scenes of making movies. And like the first time I was like, oh, like people made these, you know? Like there's actually a filmmaking process. Like there's these didn't just pop out of the ground. And I remember like we had a family trip to California and visited Universal Studios and all that and started, you know, it was like my mind was blown. And but I think what really sealed it was the Lord of the Rings DVDs. Like that was, I think, you know, the first time it was like, oh, filmmaking. Like this is a a thing that you can do. And there's like all these roles, and there's a cinematographer, and there's a director, and and it all kind of started to fall into place. And so then in middle school, it was like, this is it. This is what I'm gonna do. And my friends and I, that's when it wasn't 8 millimeter, it was like you know, a home video camera. But we started, you know, making movies in our backyard, and you know, we would do like uh uh we shot like remakes of movie, you know, The Matrix and stuff like that, but like with nothing, you know, just with like our little brothers were in the movie and stuff like that. Like it was really lo-fi. And we were editing in camera. I mean, we didn't know how to edit. Like we didn't have computers or anything. So, you know, it was like you would shoot a shot and then cut and then like turn around, shoot the reverse shot and cut and then turn around, shoot the because you'd have to do the editing in the camera so that you could then rewind the tape and play it back. I mean, this was like very primitive, early 2000s kind of stuff. But you know, we were learning and just really started getting into like the synthesis of of creating art and love of film and kind of combining these two passions. And then yeah, you know, it's like cut to 20 years later, and here we are, basically like a direct line from that to here. It just got more professional, but it's basically the same thing. I went to film school. I went to NYU Tisch to, you know, kind of go pro. But other than that, you know, that was pretty much it.
Like a nice
Um,
linear path. You kind of knew
Pretty much,
early
yeah,
on.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
like that where it's like that tie to because it's very similar. It resonates with me. Big into movies, inspired, and one of the things I'm interested in because the more I learn, I know it should have the opposite effect, but the more I learn, the more daunting it seems. Like I watch a really well produced, even like a TV show. I'll watch a really well produced TV show, and even the way they produce some of these, like I'm gonna throw it out there, Top Chef, right? I love
sure.
food. I love to cook. Top Chef is like it's less of like a cheesy reality show, and I feel like it's more, it's like a higher end. I feel like the production value is very good. And it's like there's a single scene, and it's like cut to here, and then a cut from this view, and a cut from this, and cut back. And I'm like, but the flow of the conversation is still the same. And I'm like, you can't see anybody with a camera anywhere. Very similar to like you know, WWE. I know there was a big thing. We had them on our podcast, the guys
Yeah,
who run that whole thing, and it's like it is like an art to keep, you know, you're putting live television on and to you never see another camera person in. So for
yeah,
me, that was always like I'm so intrigued and inspired by what I see and what I watch. But then at the same time, I'm like, it's almost like too much. It's like overload. It's like daunting. So for you, is it the more you learn, is it more inspiring, or do you have you ever hit a point where you're like, wow, once you started to see the behind the scenes, you're like, was there even a grain of you that was like, oh man, this is okay. Maybe I'll just keep watching movies. And did you ever have any doubt, or was it all just like absorbing the information?
no, it just got more and more cool.
That's all. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's I need to learn that.
and it also, you know, like an important part of it is also like my love of film, and you know, my sort of deepening as a cinephile got deeper as time went on too. Like, you know, things started pretty, I don't want to say basic, but you know, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, that kind of stuff is like a good gateway into loving film. But then by the time you're in middle school, you start to discover like, oh, um, Spielberg directed other movies. Like, let me go watch those. And you start to get into like The Matrix and Minority Report and, all these other films. And then you're like, oh, who's this other guy? Martin Scorsese. Let me check these out. Paul Thomas Anderson. No, no, no. And then by the time you get to high school, you're like, huh, these filmmakers that I like, now I learn a little bit more about them. Oh, they keep talking about these other filmmakers. Let me check these out. Uh, Tarkovsky, Bergman, all these. So then you start watching those, and you just kind of go deeper and deeper into the cinephile hole, and just start watching like really amazing world cinema and all the classics, and you start the internet really kind of blew up at the same time. Like this was
Yeah.
kind of the perfect nexus of coming into the information age at the same time as growing up and getting into filmmaking. So there's all this access to information and like IMDb as a resource and all that. So, like when I was in high school, the IMDb top 250 was a thing, and like all these other lists and resources. So that became a whole thing. Like my friends and I would try to watch the movies on the IMDb top 250 list and that kind of stuff. Like, oh, we got to watch all these movies. Um and then NYU Tisch, like when we started that, they sent a whole list like, oh, here's all the movies you should watch before you start studying here. And so I definitely tried to watch as many movies as I can. And the more you go down the rabbit hole, the more inspiring it is, really, because you just
Mhm.
start to see things that just blow your mind. I mean, it's the same thing that you're talking about with WWE. It's like, how did they do that? Like, how did they accomplish these things? How, you watch something uh, like Soy Cuba, they're accomplishing these shots, these camera movements that seem impossible to pull off. And this is like in the early 1960s. And just the level of imagination and rigging and all that. It's just mind blowing. And especially, I mean, now I can look at it and really analyze it and understand it. But
Mhm.
as a 17-year-old, you watch it and you're just like, how did they do that? Because you still don't quite have the tools to like understand it. And the other thing that was really mind-blowing and also kind of frustrating is that the tools that I had access to as a 17-year-old were very disconnected from professional filmmaking tools. And that's very different today because
Mhm.
nowadays, like even your iPhone can look cinematic. Like you turn on cinema mode and you pretty much have like a good approximation of like shallow depth of field, and like the telephoto lens on this looks pretty good. But certainly, an FX3 or a Blackmagic or any of these other cameras like look really good. But back in my day, and I think we're a pretty similar generation.
Yeah.
We had mini DV and DVX and that kind of thing. Like those early days of digital cinema, like those cameras looked like can we curse? Those cameras looked like crap. Like they um uh and they did not look like movies. They did not look like
Mhm.
cinema. And I remember being so frustrated, like, why are the films that I'm making as in high school, like, why don't these look like movies? And I didn't understand why I couldn't get my stuff to look like high-end cinema. Why doesn't it have like shallow depth of field? Why doesn't it look as rich as motion picture, as film, and as with high-end cinema lenses and all this? Like I didn't understand the disconnect.
Mhm.
And of course now I do, but at the time it was like this big gap that was this mystery. It was like, and it just was more motivation. Like, I need to figure out how to
Gotta get the pieces. It just looks
get
like
there.
a home video with a storyline and not a movie.
Yeah, and you find all these tricks and hacks. Like you figure out, oh, you know what? If I zoom in on this fixed lens that's built into this handy cam, it does create shallow depth of field. I didn't understand why at the time, but you figure out all these little hacks and tricks.
Mhm.
Um, so it was a learning process, but it was a good learning process. It was a fun way to kind of get into it, I think.
Do you have you found that you're more inspired by like is there a person or was it more a movie? Like if you had to put your inspiration, was it the movies you were watching or was it like was it a Scorsese or was like, hey, everything Scorsese does, it's really his style, or was it movies or particular movies that you saw?
I think it was more like a body of work,
Okay.
as opposed to a specific person. I mean, there were certainly a lot of like a number of filmmakers that I found really inspiring. I was at the time really inspired by music video directors. Like this was right at the peak of Spike Jonze and Michel
Gosh, you
Gondry.
read my mind. I was thinking Spike Jones MTV era. I'm like,
Yeah,
he's gonna
it was
say
the
it. Yeah,
peak. It was the peak of that.
yeah. Beastie
And they
Boys
had the
video.
Yep. And they had those DVD box sets with all those music videos that they did, and Mark Romanek and Chris Cunningham, and then YouTube came out right when I kind of graduated from high school, and killed the music video industry with like all those high-end music videos and all those directors. By that point, they had all started making movies, and really stopped doing music videos anyway. But I think those directors were really inspiring, and I really like P.T. Anderson and Stanley Kubrick and pretty much all the usual suspects.
Mhm.
Uh, but
Do you think
yeah,
it's easier now with all the technology, or in a way? I mean, it's like we've gotten all the technology. It's easier, it's cheaper, but at the same time, there's more inspiration, but there's also more competition. It's harder to stand out. Like,
yeah.
does that even? I know there's some people like I don't care about standing out. I think it's great that we have access, and I think access is the best thing if you're just worried about creating your own vision. But there are a lot of people. It's like there's the argument you want if your work isn't seen, then especially with film, it's like you want your work to be seen and appreciated and inspire others.
I think it's easier and I think it's harder. I think what was great what's easier is the access to tools and technology. That's what we were missing, really.
Yeah.
Going back to the kind of mini DV thing and DVX, and the technology really wasn't there. That was the disconnect. And that it really took going to a professional, like a high-end film school, to get access to tools that were even remotely close to professional. And even then, it was like borderline, because they had pretty old stuff, and you had to kind of rent high-end film equipment if you wanted to shoot on an Arri Alexa, which only came out halfway through film school. Like when I started film school, the Alexa wasn't even a thing. Um, so nowadays, it's like the access to stuff that looks as good as cinema um, is at your fingertips, right? So that is huge. Editing software, education, online resources, like all of that stuff is so different now than it was 20, 25 years ago. Uh, on the other hand, I think what was great about when I started was we were kind of in a bubble, and social media didn't exist. Like it not just was not a thing, like it didn't really exist at all. I mean, there was like you know, MySpace, I guess. Nobody, we weren't really using that. I mean,
Right.
Facebook, I think, existed on college campuses.
You
Like,
were talking to people that you knew. The internet wasn't for meeting strangers. It was for connecting with people you already knew.
exactly. It was not what it is now.
Yeah.
It was very different. And so I think the incentives of nowadays I talk to people who are just starting out, and I think that I feel like there's a pressure and there's incentives to um create work that feels like you need to share it, or that people need to interact with it uh very early on, that I never felt in those early days. Like even in film school, like you still felt like you were in this bubble, like, oh, we're just making little student films or short films, like nobody's gonna see this stuff. It's just for us, it's just for learning, it's just an exercise. That there was never this pressure that this is for anybody else, Whereas I think that that's changed quite a bit. And uh, I think that pressure is artificial, by the way. Like I don't think that's real, but I think you can reject that pressure. But I also understand that it's there too. Like you have to kind of acknowledge that those pressures exist, and I get why people feel the pressure. And yeah, there is more competition. It's harder to stand out. It's easier to get distracted. Like it's easier to kind of um be more motivated by perception and be more motivated by like what gear you're using, or are you doing something trendy or whatever. Like I think all of those incentives and those pressures are um a lot more present. I mean, again, when I was sort of starting out, like none of that was even really a thing. Like it wasn't even a consideration.
Okay.
And yeah, so I think it was a little more isolated. It
Mhm.
was kind of a better way to come up without I don't know, feeling that kind of those external elements. Now, the flip side of that is when I graduated film school, I came into a professional world like clueless, like I really had no idea what the professional sphere entailed, especially in the commercial world, because film school like had gave us no context of like the commercial filmmaking world at all.
Interesting.
It was entirely focused on narrative filmmaking.
Okay.
And even then, it was kind of a bubble of like indie narrative filmmaking. Like you make a short and it goes to a film festival and maybe picks up. But like it's a very narrow path of kind of narrative filmmaking. And it's also mostly focused on theory. Like it's focused on filmmaking technique and history and um film tools and language, which is all great. Like I think all that stuff's super important, but it was not very there was not a lot of emphasis on the industry, at least at in NYU. I think maybe
Mhm.
the LA film schools put a little bit more emphasis on that because they're a little bit more situated within the film industry.
Okay.
But yeah, so I think maybe now an advantage of being more plugged into the larger world with social media and all that is that people at a younger age are maybe a little bit more aware of like how it works earlier on, which could maybe be an advantage. But again, it's a double-edged sword because also, the pressures of that and the competition and the volume of it can be overwhelming. It can be hard. It's really tough.
Yeah,
So
that's an
I get
interesting dynamic with this. All the information's out there, and you're already seeing a place where people don't necessarily need to go a traditional learning route, where
yeah,
you can kind of. I mean, there's 6 year olds that are already more successful than I am, and you see kids teenage. Like I actually one of my mentees, uh, shout out to Quinn up there in Connecticut,
like
and
Quinn.
Quinn is making or was making films in high school. Quinn is actually, I want to say, I'm gonna get it wrong. I think might be going to Tisch actually, but Quinn,
That,
they were making films in high school that had like advanced plot lines and story and character development, and it was like this is not this is pre-college, and just with what you're getting in high school photography and high school film classes. So it's like, yeah, all this information is out there. There's such a rich body of film to study. I mean, we've had decades and decades and decades, and we've had just some phenomenal filmmakers out there and DPs that are just doing amazing things. We've seen, now you can go online and you can learn how to color grade and you can teach yourself to color grade and lighting, audio, all this stuff. You could teach yourself audio and you can work on sound design on your own. So this is all out there. How is this changing the need of film school? Like, is there something like, would you recommend somebody, do they need film school? Or
yeah.
what did you get from it?
Well, I'll also say like there was this other kid that a friend of mine connected me with who like from South Dakota who I think also ended up going to Tisch, and I saw his high school work, and it like visually he's like wants to focus on cinematography, And visually, this stuff looked stunning, like really high level. And my high school stuff looked like garbage, like just trash. And it was just really amazing because it just shows how um it really just shows this gap. Like, oh, nowadays you have access to so many more resources and so much more inspiration, and also the tools and everything. Like, just the level is so much higher. Um, but I think the thing that you get out of it, and some people don't need this, but the thing that you get out of it is community. Like, the thing that you
Mm.
get is collaborators and connections and friendships and filmmaking is all about collaborations and that network that you build. I mean, the entire your entire career is built on the people that you know and the people that you meet and get to know. Like, you cannot build a career in filmmaking on your own, like in a bubble. You need to meet other people, and who introduce you to other people, who introduce you to other people. And I can like trace step by step. Oh, I met this person who introduced me to this person, who I then worked with this person, who then this person, that led to where I am now because I went to film school. And that's not to say that it was, maybe if I went to a different school, I would have met a different set of people who would have introduced me to this and this and this and this. Like, a different path would have emerged. But um and also I know plenty of people who didn't go to film school who met people a different way, that had the sort of gumption and wherewithal to just sort of inject themselves and introduce themselves to people on their own and just start working on sets, like, without having gone to school, and just start like PAing or working at a rental house or whatever it is and start meeting people that way. I would not have been able to do that. Like, I wouldn't have known to do that. So I think I needed the organized structure of a school to like know who to talk to and like what to do, because I was clueless. But other people, maybe, especially nowadays, could figure it out on their own. But I think, you know, I came from a place, like, I had no connection to the industry. I didn't really have a lot of other friends who were into filmmaking. Um, and so being able to go to a place where there was like so many other filmmakers who wanted to do what I wanted to do and were passionate about it, I think was kind of instrumental in, you know, just being able to uh build those connections and meet people. And I think that's really the main thing you get out of film school. That and the other thing is really just like a deep, truly academic education about film history and film language, which again, you can self-teach, but I do find that people who have that film school education, like the true academic understanding of film language and film history, there's a certain language, like directors especially all speak that language, whether they went to film school or not. Directors speak that language almost always because they're all like crazy cinephiles, and directors like just speak movie. And so as a cinematographer, you kind of need to be able to speak film language. So whether you self-teach it or learn it in like an academic setting, it's like you kind of need to know that, at least if you're shooting movies. Commercials maybe less so, but if you're shooting films and working with film directors, like, you really need to speak that language. And it is really a great way to learn that, I've found, at least.
Yeah, that's a great
So
answer. I
those
love
are
that.
sort of advantages. Yeah, but it's expensive. It's not easy. It's a burden.
Mhm.
So you have to weigh if it's really worth it. But
Very, very nuanced answer there. I love that. The community aspect, I think you can't understate that enough, especially, yeah, it's still photography. You can go out and you could be a still photographer and you could find a way to do your thing. With film, there's no way. You need people, you need a network, and that's a really, I never would have thought that aspect of it. I would have thought more of the second half of your answer, like the the traditional approach where you need this education and you need somebody who knows what
Yeah.
they're doing to teach about the history and all that. Um, if you had to take maybe five things, I'll give you three to five. I don't want to lock you into five. Where does the order, the hierarchy of importance come when we start talking about the elements of a film in terms of storyline, character development, lighting, cinematography in terms of how it's shot, the angles, and all of that stuff that goes in that. If you could take maybe three to five elements and kind of rank them in what your experience has been or what you've picked up in your time in the industry, that for younger and aspiring filmmakers, where would you rank these things, just these different elements? And we don't have to go down a huge list, but if it's like, hey, story development, character development, lighting, and then you might have color grading down at the bottom, or if you can just these pieces that make a film, in your opinion, how do you rank the order of importance?
Yeah, I mean the number one is story. Like that's the most important thing because you could have the most beautiful film in the world, and if the story is shit or uninteresting or I mean story and character are kind of the same thing.
Hmm.
So it's like if the story, the character, the script are bad, it doesn't matter how good it looks. It's not going to be a good movie. Like it just doesn't matter. And there's plenty of movies out there that are maybe not the most visually interesting, but are have an incredible script and are just really compelling. And are there's masterpieces of film that are not the most visually compelling films that are still just like some of the best movies ever made because of their stories and script and character. And like that's ultimately what cinema is. It really is the synthesis between those two things, but it is ultimately a storytelling medium first and foremost that uses visuals to, enhance and tell the stories. So that's number one. Lighting is number two, because I think of all of the elements of cinematography, lighting is the most important one. And I think the it's the most underappreciated one. I think because it's the hardest one to kind of wrap your hands around. It's easier to kind of physically understand camera lenses, camera movement, and even color grade because they're a little bit more tangible and technical. And lighting is a little bit more ephemeral, like a little bit more um, hard to grasp and a little bit more subjective. But lighting is kind of the most important part of cinematography because it really kind of makes or breaks what the image is, and uh uh the camera and lenses and all that like ultimately is sort of secondary to the lighting. Like they don't really matter beyond what they're pointed at. Like you could swap out the lenses, the camera, like all of that stuff is interchangeable.
Mm.
But what really makes a difference in mood and feeling and like what you're actually looking at is what is in front of the camera, not what is on the camera. Like ultimately lenses mostly are all kind of the same, like fundamentally, you know, there's camera nerds can tell the difference between lenses and all the different elements and oh, this lens has this kind of flare and this lens has that kind of flare and spherical versus anamorphic and all that. But the truth is that 99% of people who watch movies don't can't tell the difference between they can't even tell the difference between spherical and anamorphic, and like I've seen this in action, like you ask somebody, hey, did you notice this kind of lens versus that kind of lens? And they're like, no, I don't know. I don't even know what you're talking about. Most people don't even notice aspect ratio changes. If you ask them to point, like, did you notice that the thing changed? And they're like, no. Um, so all of that stuff's for camera nerds and cinema people. Lighting, other people notice. That
Mm.
is something that affects how an audience feels and perceives a scene. Like that makes a huge difference in it's kind of connected to story, really, like because that completely changes the mood and the vibe and the atmosphere of the film, of a scene, of the story that you're telling. So like lighting is everything, because lighting change, affects, like, is this a happy scene? Is it a sad scene? Is this a dramatic scene? Is it tense? Is it scary? Is it whatever? So lighting, and then everything else.
Okay.
Color grading would be next, because color grading, again, I think can really affect a lot of stuff. Um, and is very important in affecting the look of a film even more than lenses and pretty much anything else. I think probably last on the list is like the actual camera, especially these days. Like all the cameras are pretty
Everything's good.
cool. Like everything is so high level that like Venice, Alexa, like the high level cinema cameras are pretty much interchangeable at this point. There's like small variations between, like, do you need something really good in low light? Do you need something that has a separated head, like for mounting on cars? Do you need whatever? Like those nuances of, like ergonomics basically are what separate the cameras. But in terms of their performance, they're like the same. And even like the kind of level below the high level cinema cameras, they also all look really good. So that's like the least important thing. So there's the ranking.
Interesting. Well, look, you mentioned storytelling as number one, and we didn't get into it in the green room, but Cooper on our team is a filmmaker, and so he wanted to know if there was a landmark change early in your career that took you to the next level in storytelling, or
Ooh.
how do you if that's the most important thing, how do you get better at storytelling? Is there techniques that help, or how do you take yourself, or in your personal career, was there something that took you to another level?
Oh, what a great question. I think I think it comes with experience and time. Like, you sort of have to learn your taste. And I think it's something I've talked about before, but learning your taste is maybe the most important part of building a career in filmmaking in general. And this is across any discipline, cinematography, directing, whatever. And it's the only thing that it's like, yeah, there's no shortcut to it, because it really just takes time, because you sort of have to make mistakes in order to learn your taste. It kind of requires you to like put on a blindfold and walk into a forest and like feel around on the trees and like go down a path and reach a dead end and be like, oh, okay, this leads nowhere. Okay, let me go down this path. Okay, this leads nowhere. Like that's kind of the only way to do it. Um, because you can't, you won't know what your taste is until you find it. Like I don't know if that analogy fully makes sense, but that's kind of the best way I can describe it, is like you have to kind of try things to see if you like them. And so it's the same thing with learning like what your storytelling instincts are telling you, like even in terms of what projects you take on. So for example, like there's projects that I did earlier in my career that, I did maybe thinking like, oh, maybe this would be good. And then, it doesn't turn out the way that you think it will, or uh, there was something about it that maybe you thought had a spark of interest, and then it turns out like, oh, that didn't turn out well, or I don't like how that was executed, or whatever. And you start to learn what works, what doesn't work from a storytelling standpoint, from a cinematography standpoint. Like telling the story this way didn't work. I really didn't like how that performance turned out. I really didn't like how we captured that, how this script translated visually, how the director did this, how to, like, you're constantly, constantly, constantly finding the limitations of what you like and what you don't like from a storytelling standpoint, from a taste standpoint, across the whole filmmaking discipline, and learning from it. And then on the next project, you're like, okay, on the last one, I really didn't like this. So for the next project, I'm going to look for something that, if I see this other thing that I didn't like on the last project, I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to turn this project down if I see that again. And slowly but surely, you kind of sharpen your taste till you kind of find what you really like. And it's Ira Sachs talks about it. It's this thing called the gap. There's a great video essay about it that kind of takes his audio and kind of sets it to video. But it's the concept of the gap is it's the gap between like what you think you like and then what you're capable of executing. And
Interesting.
so it's the creative gap. And the process of honing in your taste is about closing that gap and understanding like, I like these movies. I like whatever, The Dark Knight and Clockwork Orange and Apocalypse Now and whatever. Okay. But the movies that I make are not that, right? Like, so how do I make the stuff that I make better so that they're closer to the stuff that I like? That's closing that gap, right? And so that's just a long process of trial and error of like, trying out a technique or taking on a project that doesn't turn out the way that you like, and then taking on a project that does turn out, or like one scene in a film that, maybe the whole movie doesn't turn out that great, but there's one scene that you're like, oh, you know what? That scene where it turned out really great, or that performance or that moment was really good, or I really liked how we did that. And then slowly but surely things get better and better and better and better. And for me, the creator was definitely a big breakthrough. Like that felt like a really bit that was like, this is the one. Like this is the first time from start to finish. I feel like this is what I wanted to do.
Mm.
And now the last movie that I did, which isn't out yet, feels like another one. I was like, okay, number two. Like I got the hang of this.
You're getting in the
This is
right
the kind
direction.
of director I want to work with. There's a vision here. We're executing at a high level. The stuff that I see in my head is translating into visuals. There's no barrier in the way. And it took 12 years, 11 years. Um, I mean, if you go all the way back, it's like 20 since I started like non-professionally messing with mini DV cameras. So it takes a long time to kind of get there. But uh but and even now it's like I'm still at the start really of the journey too. And it'll only get better. You're still honing it all the time. So I have no idea if that answer made any sense or answered the question at all, but
He
hopefully.
said, "This is awesome. Thanks,
Well,
Oren."
great.
So there you go. He said that answer ruled. All right, good. See,
Cool.
you hit the mark. I'm
Good.
interested. This is me just being selfish here, and I've always wondered, and I've never had an opportunity to ask, somebody who actually does it, how much do you shoot? Like you're shooting a film, how much is it reined into like how much is left on the cutting room floor? How much do you overshoot? How much like when you're shooting a scene, is it ever like, okay, this is kind of what I had in mind, but I want to shoot this just in case, or maybe shoot it a different way, or I like this shot right here, but let's try it over here. Because I know it's easy to do. Me being a still photographer, it's easy for me to say, okay, boom, this is kind of what I was thinking, but let's shoot it this way, or let's shoot it maybe punched in a little more. Let's do this. That's easy. I know on a film, it's not as easy to just rearrange everything and hey, we're just going to shoot five different takes of this. How much do you leave on the cutting room floor? How much do you go in and how tightly do you stick to what you go in with the plan?
It entirely depends on the budget and the schedule. So on
Okay.
an indie film, very little because it's like your margin is nothing. You know, you have so little time that you have to shoot what you need. Like there's if you have 20 days to shoot a movie, um there's no margin. So you have to shot list everything. and because you have to shoot 4 scenes a day. So, um, that means like you have 3 hours per scene, and you have to get all your shots in 3 hours for 4 scenes. So, and that means each shot you probably get 2 or 3 takes, and then you have to move on. So there's not a lot of wiggle room. There's not a lot of room for experimentation. You just need to like know what you want, know what you need, get a couple takes, and move on. Not the most exploratory process. Um, on a longer shoot, uh, you're, like maybe a 35 day schedule. That was the last film I did was 35 days. On a shoot like that, you're probably doing 2 scenes a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. That's a bit of a better schedule because that does give you a little bit more room to kind of like explore the scene a little bit. Um, and for that one, it kind of depends on the director. There's some directors that like to explore a little bit and try things out. Like maybe let's try it from here. Maybe let's try it from here. Maybe let's try it from here. And like let's try different things out. Like maybe you do, 9 or 10 takes, just to try different things. And it also depends on the actors. Some actors like to do multiple takes and some don't. Uh, and then on a longer shoot, like The Creator, we shot for 80 days.
Wow.
And so, but also the process of making that film was very unique because it was very exploratory. Like it was almost documentary style, um, on purpose. Like it was designed to be, like we would set up a scenario and then kind of not, I mean, calling it improv makes it sound like it was like, oh, we were just making it up as we went along. And it wasn't. It was very planned, but it was like designed to allow room to kind of like go in and like find the shots as we went because we wanted it to feel spontaneous. But as a result, that movie probably had the highest ratio of stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor, also because a lot of scenes ended up getting cut out. So, like on the last movie that I did that isn't out yet, nothing got cut. Like everything that we shot is in the movie,
Wow.
scene-wise. So, there's like takes that obviously got cut, but every scene that we shot is in the movie. But on the creator, there's like 40 minutes got cut out of the movie that we shot. So it really just depends on, a longer schedule allows you more time to explore and shoot stuff that doesn't end up in the movie. Medium schedule gives you more time to do more takes. Short schedule, no margin of error. And usually the people represent it with a ratio. So it's like a shooting ratio,
Mhm.
4-to-1, 5-to-1, like how much you shoot versus how much is in the movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like, 4 times the footage versus how much is actually in the movie. So 4-to-1 is like a typical ratio.
Okay.
You shoot 4 times as much footage as you need to just because of how much extra takes you do and stuff like that.
Does
But
that
on the
relate really tightly to storytelling as far as like something like the creator per se? Is it more is on the cutting room floor? Is it hey, we're piecing together the story? Is it more about the storytelling and trying to leave out stuff? Like I always find it interesting to look at deleted scenes
Yeah.
and see like why wasn't it in? Or there's some that it's an obvious decision. There's some that's like wow, this makes seems like it was a good scene, but maybe it didn't fit the arc or so.
Yeah, and look, on the creator, there was a non-linear storytelling structure. So that's why a lot of stuff ended up on the cutting room floor because there was like sort of a complex flashback, like extended flashback that was intercut throughout, like in the original script, it was intercut throughout the whole movie.
Okay.
Um, and when they edited the movie together, a lot of time this happens a lot of times. Something like seems really good when you write it, and then when you actually edit it, you're like, this actually sucks because it's really boring to watch. Like sometimes something reads really well because, when you read it like in a book, it's fine. And then when you watch it, you're like, oh, this is boring. So what happened with that movie is there's a narrative, there's a linear narrative that's in present day that moves forward. And then it's intercut with, every chapter there's like a flashback. So there's like linear narrative and then 5 minute flashback, and then a linear narrative, and then a 5 minute flashback, and then another, and then a 5 minute flashback. And so on in a script form, or if you read that in a novel, it's no problem. But when you watch that in a movie, it just slows down the progress of the story so much that it was just kind of boring. And so they had to retool the entire flashback, um, and they took all the non-linear flashbacks and they got rid of that structure entirely. They put them all into one flashback and they shortened it to like 5 minutes, because there was originally like probably 30 minutes worth of material that was spread out throughout the whole movie. They condensed it into like 5 minutes, um, because otherwise it would be way too long to just like halt the movie in the middle and do an extended flashback. And then they also shortened the beginning because there's also this thing where basically the movie only really starts when, they go on the mission. And so there's all this opening exposition stuff where you're kind of just setting up the character and the story. And there was all this extra stuff that, it's great. It's character detail, it's like world building, but it doesn't move the story forward. And that also happens a lot. That's pretty typical for like sci-fi fantasy stuff. Lord of the Rings is the same thing. Like if you look at the deleted, the stuff that got cut from those movies, it's a lot of stuff early on because, it's the stuff that's fun. It's the world building. It's the early stuff, the character stuff. But the problem is that you need the plot to start. And if the plot
Um,
doesn't start early enough,
you
you
lose
know,
people.
you lose the audience because they're just like, when is this story going to get going? So that's the other thing that got cut a lot. And they also cut a lot of stuff out at the end for the same reason, because once the movie kind of gets towards the end, you're sort of like, all right, you got to you got to end the movie. When you get to the climax of the movie, you're sort of like, how long can you drag this out? Like at some point you need to, once it's clear that the movie is reaching its like peak, you're sort of like, all right, it's time to end. And that was another thing where there was like 5 extra minutes within there where you're sort of like, all right, we get it. The movie's over. So they cut more out of the ending. So that's the kind of stuff that ends up getting cut, especially in a big sprawling movie like that. Um,
Interesting.
yeah.
Dude, this was more helpful and inspiring than you know. Like this, honestly, I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the time, I'm like, damn, it's time to wrap. I'm like, I'm gonna have to track it. I'm gonna be front row at Build. I'm just throwing my questions out, like, hey, I
To be
forgot this one.
continued. Yeah, yeah. There's more to come.
I love it. Can you give us a preview? What can people expect at Build to hear, to learn?
Build is going to be fun. We got Shane on the panel with me. So that's always going to be a firecracker of a conversation. And our focus is about the future of filmmaking, which we didn't talk about. We all talked about the past. We're going to be talking about the future. And the future of filmmaking is interesting. There's a lot of question marks and uncertainty that we're going to talk about. A lot of technological advances to discuss and debate. We will talk about AI. Ooh. Uh, that will be discussed. We both have uh, thoughts about it that we will share, and I won't tease uh, our thoughts, but you'll have to come and find out.
There we go.
But yeah, it should be a fun conversation. Should be lively.
Awesome. Now, Oren, honestly, can't wait. I'm gonna have to find my way down there. Hopefully, they don't have me tied up doing something, and I can come check it out. Because I
Yeah.
literally we scratched the surface, and it's one thing. Like I'm a cinephile, but when I get to talk to somebody who knows way more than me and is out there doing it and is talented, this is like, especially when I have an opportunity to ask whatever I want to ask. I'm sitting here, I'm like, what am I gonna? How do I only have it 45 minutes to an hour? I'm like, this is barely enough time. But I want to thank you for your time. And again, June 17th, 11 a.m. on the fourth floor filmmaking stage. Oren's going to be there. Really, really, really good conversation. There were so many times today I wanted to ask about the future and what's coming. And I'm like, no, I can't even, I'm like, I don't even want to ask him about what he's got going on. I'm like, I want to leave all of that for you guys to check out for yourselves at Build. Again, we got a lot of great presenters, speakers, artists, creatives, whatever you want to call it. They're going to be there live at the Javits Center. Huge thank you to Oren again. We do have his website, orensoffer.com, in the description of this YouTube. So we thank everybody who is joining us live. If you're catching on a replay, we thank you as well. If you're around in the tri-state area or you have disposable income, you can just fly in for the 2 days, do that. But Oren, any closing words from your end?
Yeah, hope to see you all there. Come on down, ask the rest of the questions. We're ready.
There you go. Cooper's got a notebook full of notes and questions, I'm sure. Huge thank you to Oren once again, and to all of our viewers. We always thank you. You know what we do here, free education. We do it for you. So huge thank you to all of you out there in the interwebs watching. But that is it. Another edition of the B&H Event Space now in the books. Catch y'all next time.
See ya.